technology anybody else would surely know. He's watching her go. But what a fool believes. He's sleeping. The wise man has the power to reason away. But love can come and love can go. Why can't love return once more to reason away? Oh Lord, I believe she's never gone away. Oh Lord, to reason away. I believe she's never gone away. Who's got the power? Nothing at all.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Emmanuel I. Smith, your host, and this is an introduction to the Otis Pike Committee hearings, which took place here in the United States concerning covert intelligence activities and their legality. I'm going to give you a rundown of how this committee hearing was styled and the names of the congressional representatives that were present. This is the U.S. Intelligence Agencies and Activities, Intelligence Costs and Fiscal Procedures document. The hearings were before the Select Committee on Intelligence, U.S. House of Representatives, 94th Congress, first session. It ran from July 31st into the month of August. And it covered August 1st, August 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, 1975. And this is printed for the use of the Senate Committee on Intelligence, U.S. Government Printing Office, Washington, 1975. The Select Committee on Intelligence consisted of Congressman Otis G. Pike of New York was the chairman, Robert Giamo from Connecticut, Robert McClory from Illinois, James Stanton from Ohio, David Treen from Louisiana, Ronald Dellums from California, Jim Johnson from Colorado, Morgan Murphy of Illinois, Robert Caston Jr. of Wisconsin, Les Aspin of Wisconsin, Dale Milford of Texas, Philip Hayes of Indiana, William Lehman of Florida. Mr. Cyril Field was the staff director, and Aaron B. Donner was the general counsel. The staff members were Carolyn Andrade, John Atkinson, Stanley Bach, Alexander Beam, John Boos, Herbert Brooks, John Burke, Roger Carroll, Denise Gittin, Thomas Hatley, Stanley Heck, Jacqueline Hess, Peter Hughes III, Vance Hindman, Fred Kirstenstein, Charles Maddox, James Minjee, Ellis Miller, James B.F. Oliphant, Susan Paisner, Susan Poore, Gregory Rushford, Mikkel Schaefer, Josephine Schieber, Kathy Schrober, Emily Schickdoff, Roscoe Stark III, Richard Vermeeb, Jeffrey Wilden, Cheryl Tina Yamamoto, and Sandra Zune. Those were the staff members. The actual committee members I read previous to that, alongside the states that they represented. Basically, there were a number of witnesses called, and they all gave testimony to this congressional committee about the CIA intelligence, its operations, and its covert activities, its wiretapping, its its budgeting activities, its expenditures, its cohesion with other its cohesion with other intelligence agencies, including the FBI, the NSA, and the U.S. Armed Services. And it's basically an expose and a request for oversight so that these intelligence agencies were answerable to the Congress of the United States. And these hearings took place parallel to the Senator Church hearings, which we talked about in the previous lecture. So you had Congressman Pike on the congressional side and Senator Church on the Senate side, both holding hearings parallel concerning clandestine and budgetary intelligence activities in the United States. So thank you for listening, and we will begin the lecture shortly. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today's date is Tuesday, June 30th, 2026. I am your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, and the time is 1:15 p.m. Thank you for listening. I am in Miami-Dade County, Florida, and the topic of today's lecture is the Congressman Otis Pike committee hearings, the supplement and parallel to the Senator Frank Church committee hearings. Ladies and gentlemen, I do these lectures outdoors, and I may have to raise or project my voice to keep down the background noise, if any occur. Please adjust your volume accordingly, and thank you for your viewership. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we have to cover today is a whole new hearing. Last we were together here, we looked at the Senator Frank Church committee hearings, in which he ran a full-scale investigation using the full strength and power of the U.S. Senate to determine whether or not the national security apparatus of this country, particularly the FBI, the CIA, the U.S. Army, and other auxiliaries were abusing their powers as stewards of American national security methods, and whether or not these same intelligence agencies were intruding upon the lives of Americans unnecessarily, snooping through people's mail, telegrams, phone calls, you name it. Not so much in the interest of national security, but just to exercise the power that you wield. Furthermore, there was an investigation into whether or not the CIA attempted to assassinate foreign presidents, and it had. And programs like MK Ultra were discussed, where the CIA and the U.S. Army got together and found ways to use biological and chemical experiments, not just biological and chemical, but biological, chemical, and behavior experiments on the American people, on the American populace, and also on some of the citizens of Canada as well. And these open air human behavior experiments, these open air chemical experiments, these open air biological weapon experiments were done on the American people, mostly without their knowledge. And there were all kinds of backdoor dealings that were happening with the national security apparatus in this country that sort of gave it the key to unlock all kinds of covert anti-constitutional, anti-civil rights measures, actions, mechanisms, and protocols against the American people. And it was essentially a war against the American state of mind, a war against American sovereignty, and a war against the U.S. Constitution. And it was waged by the National Security Agency, by the FBI, by the CIA, by the U.S. Armed Forces against this country. Now, it wasn't every auxiliary of all of these agencies. It was their covert operations divisions. So, for example, the CIA's Technical Services Division was in on it. The FBI's Secret Operations Division was in on it. The U.S. Army's Chemical Corps and their Clandestine Operations Divisions were in on it. The National Security Agencies, their Clandestine Operations Divisions were in on it. Just know, ladies and gentlemen, for a fact that if it is a federal agency, it has a Clandestine Operations Division. That is a division within that agency that handles secret missions, secret objectives, secret projects, and secret experiments for the U.S. federal government. These things were uncovered in the Senator Frank Church committee hearings. Okay, Senator Frank Church was the Democrat from Idaho. He took it personally that the CIA and some of these other agencies had used their capacity as federal components to attempt to essentially grab American society by the hair of its heads, by the very hair on its head. I mean, collectively and metaphorically grab American society by its very hair. Grab American society by the neck and steer it any way you want it to. Okay, using covert and clandestine means, including experiments on the American people. Today we're going to look at another set of hearings. This is the Otis Pike hearing. These hearings were primarily they ran parallel to the Church Committee hearings. So the Church Committee hearings and the Pike Committee hearings ran side by side. Basically, they were parallel hearings that explored similar topics. Okay, the topics that the Church Committee focused on were government snooping into people's personal communications through its national security agencies, as well as government assassination plots in other countries. Also, it looked at MK Ultra in depth, the human behavior experimentation, and the human chemical and biological agent experimentation. These were the things that the Church Committee focused on. The Pike Committee hearings focused on a number of similar but not the same matters. Both the Church and Pike Committee hearings summoned Director William Colby, who was the director of the CIA at this time, to testify on just what it was the CIA was up to with respect to not only snooping on the American people, but authorizing experiments on the American people, some of which were deleterious, some of which were disruptive, and some of which were fatal. Okay, the senator took this very seriously. Or excuse me, the Senator Church, he took this seriously, and so did Congressman Pike. So they held parallel committee hearings to investigate these matters. And I've always looked at the Pike committee hearings as a supplement to the Frank Church committee hearings, ladies and gentlemen. So I have a number of documents here we're going to read from. We're going to do an analysis on these documents, and we are going to look at the consequential nature of these congressional hearings. I have some AI-generated modules here, which were aggregated from a number of websites on this topic. I have newspaper articles. I have Senate hearing transcripts. I have Time Magazine articles. I have a lot of material here that we're going to go through today together, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to come away from this more enlightened and more ready to understand why it's important to value your rights and liberties, to value your sovereignty, okay, to know your constitutional rights, to know that even though it is your government and it is the overarching entity that you pay taxes to sustain you and your loved ones through resources and programs, that it's still accountable to you as the taxpayer, and it's still accountable to the United States Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, so without further ado, we're going to get into the main talking points. We're going to start with the AI modules. The Otis Pike hearings were public and closed-door sessions held by the House Senate Committee on Intelligence in 1975. Tasked with investigating the CIA and U.S. intelligence agencies, the committee exposed illegal surveillance, covert assassination plots, and government overreach. The committee's combative hearings and subsequent reports uncovered shocking abuses by the intelligence community, including domestic spying, secret and unauthorized wiretapping, mail opening, and harassment of American citizens and political groups. Notice that harassment was a part of the domestic spying. It wasn't just the CIA or the or similar agencies just spying on the people. They were spying on the people, they were disrupting the people, and they were harassing the people. You see, harassment has always been a part of domestic spying apparatus. Okay, it's never just we're going to watch this guy. It's we're going to watch this guy, we're going to disrupt this guy, we're going to sabotage this guy, and we're going to harass this guy. Okay, that's been government protocol here in the United States for 75 years, ladies and gentlemen. Covert operations, CIA involvement in destabilizing foreign governments. You got budget obfuscation. The revelation that the U.S. intelligence budget was vastly larger than publicly admitted and heavily concealed across multiple departments. You had the clash with the executive branch. The committee faced immense pushback from the Ford administration, which heavily redacted the committee's findings and cited national security to prevent the release. The standoff climax when the Pike Committee voted to hold the Secretary of State Henry Kissinger in contempt of court for withholding crucial documents, while the Senate's parallel Church Committee eventually overshadowed the Pike Group in the public eye. The Pike hearings were instrumental in challenging the imperial presidency and establishing robust congressional oversight. You can read the official declassified documents and explore the historical impact through the National Security Archive. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to these hearings. The modules continue. In 1968, U.S. Congressman Otis Pike was a prominent Democratic representative from New York's 1st District. That year, he successfully retained his congressional seat while navigating the turbulent political fallout of the Vietnam War and the Tet Offensive. Pike, serving on the House Armed Services Committee, was well known for his fiscal hawkishness and skepticism regarding military spending. During this period, he notably utilized his wit on the House floor to call out bloated Pentagon defense budgets, mocking agencies for buying standard metal rods for $25.55 that could be found in hardware catalogs for just 50 cents. His 1968 re-election victory helped cement his legacy as an independent maverick, a reputation that eventually led to his appointment as the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee in 1975 to investigate CIA abuses. Biographical details and historical context of his career are available through the U.S. House of Representatives archives and Congress.gov. So, ladies and gentlemen, Otis Pike was one of those Congress people that was labeled a maverick. Okay, there are a lot of Congress people over the years who have been labeled maverick. Okay, Senator Arlen Specter was labeled a maverick. Senator John McCain was labeled a maverick. I think there was a governor who ran for president in 2008 from Alaska named Sarah Palin. She wasn't a congressperson, but she was labeled a maverick. And I think she ran alongside John McCain. I think John McCain tapped Sarah Palin as his vice presidential running mate in the 2008 election versus Senator Barack Obama and his VP pick, which was Joe Biden. So a maverick basically means that you can be a Republican maverick or a Democratic maverick. It just simply means that when it comes to voting, when it comes to your posture on political issues, you don't follow the party line. You have the capacity to break with your party on certain issues, and oftentimes you have a difference of opinion than your political party has on certain issues, and you express those differences, and sometimes you vote those differences while keeping your main political affiliation intact. That is called a maverick. So this was basically this man's role, this man's job. He was a congressman, a Democratic congressman from New York, its 1st district, and he was a maverick. I mean, he spoke his mind, he did what he wanted, but he stayed Democrat. So we have a little background information on Otis Pike. He like Frank Church, was very no nonsense. So, all right. So we're gonna move on to our next, or rather, our first. Our first congressional transcript read. We're going to read directly from the hearing of that took place itself. We're going to read a partial transcript of the actual congressional hearings. This first one is between Chairman Pike, so this is Chairman Otis Pike, and he is questioning Mr. Stotts. This would be Mr. Elmer Stotts, who was at this time the comptroller of the currency in the General Accounting Office. That role sees the head lead the nonpartisan legislative branch agency that audits federal programs, investigates the use of public funds, and provides Congress with objective analysis to improve government efficiency. Furthermore, he charters, regulates, and supervises all national banks and federal savings associations to ensure a safe, sound, and competitive financial system. So, as I read, ladies and gentlemen, the money was a big part of these hearings. Chairman Pike wanted to know why the CIA in particular was attempting to hide its national budget. How much of the American taxpayers' money is going into the CIA to function? Okay, and why is the CIA trying to hide its affiliations with certain what you might refer to as moneyed interests? Although the overwhelming vast majority of the CIA's funds came from the taxpayer, the CIA had access to 9-figure resources in the 1970s, and Chairman Pike wanted to get to the bottom of the budget, and it also wanted to get down to the bottom of how the CIA was using the money that it was receiving. Because if you can follow the money, if you can look at the expenditures that these various intelligence agencies were engaging in with the taxpayers' money, then you can get a pretty good idea of what their activities were from a skeletal point of view. I mean, there's nothing more telling than purchases. Okay, you don't need to know much about a person out of their own mouth if you have 5 years worth of bank statements from them. Okay, I don't care who you are. If you're an American citizen and you have a bank account, give me 5 years worth of your bank statements and I can tell you a lot about yourself. That's the way it is. That's the way it's always been. You don't have to sit down and tell me anything about yourself. Let me see where you spend your money and how you spend your money, and I could tell you a lot about yourself, good or bad. And it's the same way with companies. It's the same way with government agencies. Okay? If you want to know how well the company Walmart is being managed, look at its quarterly financial statements. They're released publicly because Walmart is a publicly traded company. Okay, you can buy stock at Walmart, and because it's a publicly traded company, they have to release yearly earnings reports. Okay, and their accounting documents are public record as well. So if you want to see how the company's doing, you can access those financial documents. So you can make a informed decision as to if you want to invest in Walmart stock or how much you want to invest in Walmart stock, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, the same is true for government agencies. Government agencies have budgets. The CIA, the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, the Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Trade Commission. All right, the IRS, the Library of Congress. Okay, every government component, every government auxiliary that exists has a budget. That is a set amount each year that the Congress has voted to give these government auxiliaries to function. You see, because government auxiliaries need a budget as well. It isn't just companies that work for the government, right? If you get a government contract, the government has a set budget each year that it can use for government contracts, right? So if you're a private company and the government decides to do business with you You're going to get a set start date, a set end date, and a set pay rate for the work you do. Okay, as a government contractor. The same is true for government agencies. All of them. They all have a yearly budget that they have to stay within to manage itself, right? The CIA was trying to hide its budget, and there were actually threats of contempt issued because of that. But ultimately, the committee found out what it needed to know. And it just goes to show, ladies and gentlemen, that in the 1970s in particular, the national security apparatus in this country and the intelligence apparatus in this country, all of it, every bit of it, all of them needed better oversight. All of them needed more opportunities to serve the American people, as opposed to just basically spending the American people's money on projects that were tantamount to human experimentation and biological experiments and chemical experiments, all at the expense of the taxpayer, using the taxpayer's money. It was a disgusting arrangement, ladies and gentlemen. So Chairman Pike begins, because of the restrictions which have been placed on your access to information, does the GAO, that's the General Accounting Office, know whether there is duplication in the realm of our intelligence gathering activities? Mr. Stotts replies, we would have no way of finding out, Mr. Chairman. This information is not available to us, and unless we know where the money is and where the people are, we would have no basis for making a judgment that there is duplication or lack of coordination or poor management. Chairman Pike continues, in your letter to this committee, Mr. Stotts, you refer to this first part of the 7th Clause, Article 1, Section 9 of the United States Constitution. That is the provision which states that no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. It is my feeling that the Congress does in fact make appropriations, but they do not in fact know where they are appropriating when they make the appropriations. I am more interested in the second part of that clause, which says, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. And your judgment is a regular statement and account of all public money published. Mr. Stotts, this provision is susceptible to interpretation as to whether or not it refers to the totals of the government or whether it relates to departments or activities or to functions. It has never been fully litigated. Chairman Pike, if there has been an attempt to litigate it, it was the case of the U.S. versus Richardson. Mr. Stotts, yes, but it was eventually thrown out by the Supreme Court on lack of standing, in my understanding, if my understanding is correct. There is, of course, disclosure by the Treasury and through the budget of overall expenditures. Chairman Pike, you really are an expert in this field. Do you consider the kind of disclosures we get to be that which the Founding Fathers had in mind when they referred to a statement and account of all public money? Mr. Stotts, I would certainly agree that it does not represent full disclosure. But at the same time, I would have to say, Mr. Chairman, that from the early days of our history, that there have been provisions written in the law which authorize agency heads to maintain certain expenditures in secret. Chairman Pike, we cannot write into law anything that overrides the Constitution. Mr. Stotts, but I think it's the other way around. The Congress has written into law provisions which authorize agency heads to maintain expenditures confidential. In the spite of this provision, that practice has not really been challenged in our long history for reasons of which I am unaware. Chairman Pike, the time of the chairman is up. I yield to Mr. McClory. Mr. McClory. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have any estimates as to the overall cost of the entire intelligence community? It seems to me that I call some statement about 5 or 6 billion or something like that. So I'm going to stop there because that's the end of that page. So what we have here is we have a back and forth between Chairman Pike and Mr. Stotts, who was the chief of the U.S. General Accounting Office. And he's basically saying to Mr. Stotts, why is it that there's so much secrecy around how much money the national intelligence community in this country is getting year to year? And Mr. Stotts is basically saying, well, we have the right under federal law to withhold some details about the accounting expenditures of the national security agencies in this country. And Mr. Pike replied with, well, there's a clause that attempted to litigate this situation, and it was a Supreme Court case called U.S. versus Richardson. And Mr. Stotts replied, yes, but it was eventually thrown out by the Supreme Court. Okay, so basically, they're trying to get the better of one another as to which one of these two men is right under the law. Okay, which one of these two men is right under the law? Is Mr. Pike right under the law that the General Accounting Office has to publish the activities of the financial activities of the CIA, the FBI, et cetera, or is Mr. Stotts right, saying no, the U.S. Constitution protects certain information from being released? Okay, so ultimately, Mr. Chairman Pike was correct. It was Chairman Pike that was correct. Chairman Pike basically said we cannot write into law anything that overrides the Constitution. I'm getting ready to quote his what he said here. Okay, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. Okay, Chairman Pike quoted that. That's Article 1, Section 9 of the United States Constitution. And I'll repeat it. It says, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. That means the receipts and accounting mechanisms of all public components, all of them, must be published from time to time. Okay, that settles it right there. Okay, that's from the United States Constitution. Okay, Mr. Stotts was trying to find some kind of a loophole underneath and around that, but there's no loophole underneath or around that. The United States Constitution says clearly, Article 1, Section 9, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury in consequence of appropriations made by law, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. Period. So, quite frankly, hiding money from the U.S. Senate, hiding money from the eye of the taxpayer, hiding money from the accounting and auditing mechanisms of the United States is unconstitutional. So, Chairman Pike is saying to this man in a very nice, very professional, very diplomatic, and very statesman way, print up some receipts about what the CIA is purchasing with taxpayer money. Okay, period. So we're going to look at the next page here. So Mr. Stotts is basically saying, well, even with that constitutional law, Mr. Pike, the Congress has written into law provisions which authorize some confidentiality of agency expenditures. Again, Mr. Pike or Mr. Stotts, he's looking for a loophole. He's looking for a way to sort of circumvent that constitutional law that says that receipts and expenditures must be made public from time to time. Okay? He's trying to find a way out of that. But Chairman Pike is not letting him. He's saying, period, point blank. Okay? No doubt about it. The end of the matter is the U.S. Constitution says that if you're a government agency, you have to print out and make public expenditures that your agency has undertaken with public money. All right, so we're going to look at Mr. McClory, Congressman McClory. Congressman McClory is also going to question Mr. Stotts. Mr. McClory begins, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have any estimates as to the overall cost of the entire intelligence community? It seems to me that I recall some statement about $5 or $6 billion or something like that. Mr. Stotts says we have seen those figures too, Congressman McClory, but we would have to simply. Mr. McClory interrupts him. That's just a guess. Mr. Stotts, regard those as guesses unless they can be verified. Mr. McClory says you have prepared 2 reports for Senator Percy. They are fairly recent, last year, I believe. Those are considered as secret, but if you have received extensive information, I gather, from the intelligence agencies other than the CIA and the NSA, now have those been made available to other persons other than Senator Percy? Mr. Stotts continues, I believe that they have been made available to this committee. There is no restriction on information which is classified as secret except for individuals receiving it being qualified to receive it. Mr. McClory takes over. So you either could have it released to this committee with the understanding that it is a secret document. Mr. Stotts, that is right. Any person who is willing to receive the information under the rules that apply to classified information is eligible to receive this kind of report. Mr. McClory, now if you were authorized to conduct investigations such as you perform for the Congress with respect to other agencies of the CIA and other intelligence agencies on a confidential basis, that would be the legislative authority which would give you the prerogatives, but you don't seem now to have. Mr. Stotts, that is correct. We may have to have more explicit authority than we have today. Mr. McClory continues, would you encounter any difficulty if you think ultimately we should recommend the establishment of a joint congressional committee on intelligence to overview the intelligence community with respect to the subject of secrecy of the reports you might prepare for the benefit of such a committee? Mr. Stotts, I would like to say 2 or 3 things with respect to your question. And he goes on to say he would favor a joint committee. And he would like to favor it growing out of the experience of the Joint Committee of Atomic Energy, which has received confidential documents. Mr. McClory, or Congressman McClory, continues, there is an existing rule of the House which permits any member of the House to see and examine secret information with the same limitations as other members. Do you have an opinion as to what rule or whether you think that might be susceptible to some modification in order to regain secrecy of such reports? Mr. Stott says, speaking for the General Accounting Office, we certainly would not want to be in a situation where there was any concern that we would be supplying information to other than a body authorized by the Congress to obtain that type of information. And we would not do so by the same token because of the sensitivity of the congressmen that we are dealing with. We need some part of the Congress to which we can relate and with which we can have an agreement on the areas on which we could undertake reviews. Mr. McClory, thank you very much. So basically they're just having a discussion on the procedural handling of sensitive documents and information, because some of the documents and information that this committee, this congressional committee, is asking the GAO for, the General Accounting Office, the General Accounting Office is reluctant to hand them over because of the sensitivity of them, and they're trying to come to some agreement as to how and when these sensitive documents on accounting practices across federal agencies could be handed over to Congress. Apparently Mr. Stotts wants to do this in the most he wants to do it in the most cohesive way possible, and Mr. McClory is tossing around the possibility of calling a joint committee, specifically a congressional joint committee, specifically called to receive sensitive General Accounting Office documents. So that's going to be a recurring theme in these hearings, is the people in the intelligence community in this country, all the way up to the director, W.E. Colby, okay, turning over sensitive documents to this committee. Okay, this committee actually had to threaten people with contempt and actually voted to hold Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State of the United States, in contempt of these hearings for not handing over sensitive documents concerning the activities of the national intelligence agencies of the United States. So this committee was very serious in their quest to obtain all the sensitive documents they needed to give them a clear picture as to how much money these national security agencies were getting from the taxpayer and what they were doing with that money. You see, they'd already heard the horror stories of MK Ultra. Okay, they'd already heard some of the horror stories of the fallout from certain programs like MK Naomi and Operation Chaos. They'd heard the stories about MK Search and all the biological weapons that the U.S. was testing on American citizens, all the chemical weapons that the U.S. was testing on American citizens. This committee wanted to know just where was the money going, how much of it was going there, and how much of it was being used to do these experiments on people. That's it. So next up is going to be Mr. Giamo, Congressman Giamo. He's going to be the next to question Mr. Stotts. And what you'll notice is that when a witness is subpoenaed to these congressional committees or these Senate committees, all the committee members present are allowed to question the subpoenaed witness giving testimony for an allotted period of time, and that's on various issues. I mean, some of these Senate committee hearings and these congressional committee hearings, sometimes they run several weeks. There's a lot that needs to be covered, and all of the Congress people involved get the opportunity to question these subpoenaed persons. All right, so Mr. McClory has already spoken. All right, Mr. Giamo steps in. In reading and listening to your testimony, you state on page 13 that since 1962, the GAO has not conducted any reviews of the CIA or any reviews that focus specifically on CIA activities. On the bottom of page 16, you say that the role of the GAO in the oversight of the intelligence community cannot be determined fully until the oversight role of the Congress is agreed upon and machinery is established to exercise this role. Then you go on to say that there has been a balance between adequate review by the Congress and the needs of confidentiality. Is it a fair inference that the GAO has very little, if any, information on the activities and expenditures of public funds by the intelligence community and members of the intelligence community of the U.S. government? Mr. Stotts replies, that is correct. Mr. Giamo, it is also correct that you are not, nor is the General Accounting Office in a position to know whether or not the CIA or other members of the intelligence family are acting within the parameters of the statutes which establish their existence and their missions. That is correct. I should add here that we are also not able to give Congress any appraisal as to the adequacy of the agency's own internal control machinery. This includes internal review of their financial requirements, accounting to the director, accounting to the National Security Council, or to anyone else. So we are in no position to make any judgment as to whether they are running a good internal management shop. Mr. Giamo, would you care to give us your opinion as to whether or not you think that this is a healthy balance between the public's need to know and the Congress's need to conduct watchdog or oversight operations? Do you think we now have a healthy balance between the intelligence community and the oversight community? Mr. Stott says absolutely not. I would emphasize that it is important that Congress know. So basically what Mr. Giamo, Congressman Giamo, is getting at is that the government accounting office, or the general accounting office, does not have any detailed files on CIA activities. It doesn't have any detailed files on CIA expenditures. It doesn't have any detailed files on CIA accounting practices. It doesn't have any detailed files on CIA's spending habits. It doesn't have any detailed files on the Central Intelligence Agency's budget. It doesn't have any detailed file on the CIA's budgetary restrictions. The General Accounting Office, which is essentially the Chief Accounting Office of the United States, has practically no information at all on the CIA's budgets and its expenditures. It has no clue what's happening in the CIA, and that is a huge problem, because what that shows is that the CIA was able to take American taxpayer money and spend it freely on anything. All right, we're looking at potentially $6 billion here. I said before 9 figures, how about 10 figures? All right, the CIA has billions and billions of taxpayer dollars at its disposal, and not even the General Accounting Office of the United States has any clue as to what the CIA is doing with that money, because the CIA hasn't produced any accounting statements or any billing statements. It hasn't produced any receipts. It hasn't produced any general financial ledgers as to what it's doing with that $6 billion. And Mr. Giamo, Congressman Giamo, is asking Mr. Stotts, do you think that's okay? And Mr. Stotts is saying, I don't think that's okay. Mr. Giamo is saying, is there any oversight on this over the CIA's activity presently coming from your office? Mr. Stotts says absolutely not. So you see the problem there, ladies and gentlemen. It's just it's a slippery slope. All right, my significant other Lori always rolls her eyes at me when I talk about the slippery slope in politics. Okay, and I don't blame her, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, a slippery slope means that it's hard to pin down a definition of what's accurate, what's inaccurate, what's fiction, what's nonfiction, what's true, what's not true. You see, slippery slopes are difficult to get around. That's why we need the evidentiary process. Okay, we need the evidentiary process, and in this particular congressional hearings, we need the guidance of the U.S. Constitution. So there are no slippery slopes. So the correct course of action, the direct course of action, the best course of action, the constitutional course of action, the legal course of action are made plain. They're made bare. Okay, they're laid wide open for the whole world to see. Okay, because they're being made public. And once these things are made public, and they're being made public with the full oversight of not only the Senate, but of constitutional laws and regulations, then the slippery slope ends. Then we know what's legal and what's not legal plainly. So we're going to move on to the questioning of Dr. Albert C. Hall, who is the Assistant Secretary of Defense. He is accompanied by John Slack, the Director of Resource Management, Rear Admiral Donald Harvey, Chief of Staff and Deputy for Management Plans, Defense Intelligence Agency, William Jenkins, the Executive Assistant for Staff Services, National Security Agency, and and Lieutenant Colonel David Cade, Executive Assistant to Dr. Hall. So we're getting ready to look at the questioning of Dr. Albert C. Hall, the Assistant Secretary of Defense. And this is going to begin on page 176 of my lecture notes. Dr. Hall begins, and then we move down to Chairman Pike, then Dr. Hall, then Chairman Pike, then Dr. Hall, and on down the line. So we have Dr. Hall. Anything that the committee needs in its deliberations, I am in favor of it having. I would suggest that you determine after I am through with this particularly any discussion in closed session in which I will treat the material which is used for the fundamental control of the National Security Agency and all agencies. Chairman Pike: well, Dr. Hall, we did make a formal request that you bring us this piece of paper creating the National Security Agency with you, and you tell us that you want us to have everything we need, but you didn't bring it. Why? Dr. Hall replies: we don't have to get clearance for releasing this material to you, sir. Chairman Pike: are you telling me that someone told you not to bring us this piece of paper? If so, who? Dr. Hall: we were not cleared to bring it this morning. We got the request last night. We are not cleared to bring it today. Chairman Pike: who told you not to bring it this morning? Dr. Hall: well, we have a general procedure in handling all intelligence documents to get clearance to bring them here, and when we haven't received that clearance, we would be very happy to bring it. Chairman Pike: I hear what you're saying, but you haven't answered my question. Who told you not to bring it? Dr. Hall: well, fundamentally, we handle the clearance of all such material through the Assistant to the Secretary until we have. Chairman Pike interrupts him. The Assistant to the Secretary, Dr. Hall, continues, of Defense. Chairman Pike: was it the Assistant to the Secretary of Defense who told you not to bring this? Dr. Hall: let us say that the correct statement on the situation is that until we get clearance for it, we cannot bring it. As of this morning, I had not yet received clearance for it. Chairman Pike: let me ask you a question. Is it not a fact that it was the White House that made the determination that you should not bring that piece of paper here? Dr. Hall: well, as far as I know, it was not, but I would like to say that I believe that the National Security Council directive is one that is properly considered in the closed session. and I'm happy to discuss it with you later today. Chairman Pike, we are talking about a piece of paper, not testimony, and I am advised that our staff first started asking for this piece of paper not last night but a week ago, Monday. We are representing the legislative branch of government asked to appropriate hundreds of millions of dollars to a certain agency, and we are having difficulty finding the statutory authority for that agency even to exist. Now, isn't that ridiculous? All right, so here's what we have, ladies and gentlemen, and this is this back and forth between Chairman Otis Pike, the rogue Democrat from New York, who's the chairman of these committees, is basically going back and forth with Dr. Albert C. Hall about the documents that led to the creation of the National Security Agency. So basically, whenever a new government agency is created, there are documents that have to be filed. There are constitutions for that agency that must be filed. Because keep in mind, countries are not the only entity that have constitutions. Companies, businesses, okay, particularly large companies, they also have constitutions. Okay, they have mission statements, they have goals and objectives, and they also have budgets that are attached to them. So when the Secretary of Defense, who was present and involved in the creation of the National Security Agency, okay, did not bring the documents that were used to create that agency, okay, the documents that were filed with the federal government to create that agency, Chairman Pike was visibly and noticeably irritated. How dare you come to these proceedings? Okay, he's saying, how dare you come to these proceedings and you don't have the documents that you used to create the National Security Agency, which is one of the very agencies that we are investigating. We're investigating the National Security Agency. We want to know how it was created. We want to know how much it cost to create. We'd want to know who was behind its creation, and you can't even tell us that. And Dr. Hall, who's the Assistant Secretary of Defense, is saying, I don't have to tell you anything, Chairman. There's nothing in play here that forces me to tell you anything. And Chairman Pike is saying that's ridiculous. And Dr. Hall continues, well, there is a statutory authority for the National Security Agency, as you know. The particular directive to which you are referring is the directive which controls the operation of the agency. It's not the paper which sets up the agency, it's the directive. Chairman Pike replies, why is that document classified? Dr. Hall, it is classified because of the restrictions Congress has put on handling comment SIGINT data, and that document has such data in it. Chairman Pike continues, what you're saying is that not the restrictions the Congress has placed on handling this stuff. The Congress has passed laws allowing other people to restrict this information. Is not that the fact? Congress, to the best of my knowledge, has not classified anything. Dr. Hall continues, no, but Congress has required the proper handling of security information to ensure its protection. Chairman Pike continues, are you telling us Congress has passed a statute which prohibits Congress from seeing this document? Dr. Hall replies, not at all. In connection with this document, I really do want to say that the request came to me last night, and as soon as possible, we will have it for you. Chairman Pike continues, I just keep hearing this song, we want to cooperate with you. We want to give you all the information you need, and yet we cannot get the information and we cannot get pieces of paper. And I would appreciate it if someone could move this particular subpoena to be issued. Mr. McClory steps in, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Pike recognizes him, Mr. McClory. Mr. McClory adds, may I be recognized? Chairman Pike says, certainly. Mr. McClory says, I would like to concur in your general observations because it seems to me as if we are going to fulfill your role here and do the kind of oversight and investigative job we were required to do when we got to get this information upon which we can act responsibly. And I think it would be most unfortunate even if the appearance was given of refusal or failure to cooperate with this committee in its investigative job. I would hope myself that the documents in question will be forthcoming, giving assurances that if they do contain classified secret information, that will be respected pursuant to the rules of this committee. Chairman Pike replies, I will simply say to the gentleman that the rules and procedures of this committee will be allowed. Mr. Milford steps in. Who is the clearance authority for this document? The statement from the Director of Intelligence before this committee yesterday was that all documents were cleared to this particular committee. Who specifically is the clearance authority here? Dr. Hall states, as I mentioned, the assistant to the Secretary of Defense serves as our clearinghouse in the Department of Defense for the release of such material. So basically what we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is we have a back and forth as to why the creation documents of the National Security Agency were not brought. Chairman Pike and a couple of other congressmen are trying to establish who has the ultimate authority in the security apparatus in this country to make such documents viewable. Because what this committee is getting ready to do is they're getting ready to federally subpoena the creation documents for the NSA, the National Security Agency, since Dr. Hall didn't bring them to the committee that day. They're going to go over his head. They're going to subpoena the documents. And they're going to subpoena Dr. Hall directly because he's the one that is the clearinghouse for the release of those documents. So Mr. Milford continues, is he subordinate to the Director of Intelligence? Dr. Hall says no, he's subordinate to the Secretary of Defense. In this particular situation, my own feeling is that the documents, which are both highly classified, there is no reason at all to release them to this committee. I just have not received clearance as to this morning to bring them up with me. Mr. Stanton replies, Mr. Chairman, I move that the Select Committee on Intelligence authorizes the chairman to issue a subpoena requesting the particular documents. The National Security Council in Directive Number 6 relating to the NSA and report to the President and Secretary of Defense on the Department of Defense and by the Blue Ribbon Defense Panel, July 1st, 1970. National Command and Control Capability and Defense Intelligence. Mr. Pike asks, is there a question on the motion? The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Giamo, no response. Mr. Stanton, aye. Mr. Dellums, no response. Mr. Murphy, aye. Mr. Aspen, aye. Mr. Milford, aye. Mr. Hayes, aye. Mr. Lehman, aye. Mr. McClory, aye. Mr. Treen, no response. Mr. Caston, aye. Mr. Johnston, aye. Mr. Pike, aye. There is a vote of 10 ayes and no noes. The motion is carried and the subpoena will be issued. Dr. Hall, will you please proceed with your prepared statement at this time? Dr. Hall says, Mr. Chairman, I have with me on my right Mr. John Slack, Rear Admiral Donald Harvey, Mr. William Jenkins, and Lieutenant Colonel David Cade. So what we saw there, ladies and gentlemen, was we saw where okay, so we see where there were 10 votes to subpoena those documents, since the Assistant Secretary of Defense did not bring them to the meeting. The committee unanimously voted to subpoena those documents. So now the Department of Defense has to, under federal law, submit those documents for the Senate, for the congressional committee's review. Okay, because the NSA is a Department of Defense creation. The Department of Defense needs to present the documents of the creation of the NSA to Pike's Congressional Committee under federal law. And there will now be legal penalties if that law is not followed. So now the Congressman Pike's committee is going to get its wish. It's going to get those creation documents that were used to create the National Security Agency. And it was a vote of 10 yeses and 0 no's. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on to the next line of questioning. This is going to be between the Pike Committee and Mr. Colby. Okay, Mr. Colby is the chairman of the CIA. All right, he is the top dog in the CIA. And he is basically, he's going to testify. He's going to testify before this congressional committee headed up by Chairman Pike. I'm going to get a sip of liquids. And that was a stalker you heard sneezing in the background. They do that from time to time when they come around. That is a germ spreading mechanism. And typically when they do that, they're attempting to sort of unsettle you. Okay, that seems to be the new happening thing in Miami these days among the gang stalking community. They like to get around targets, sneeze on them, cough on them, breathe heavily in their face, belch in their face, use any bodily function that they have to get in the face of a target and expel human bacteria in the face of a target. It's a biological warfare tactic. I don't care what anyone says. That is a biological warfare tactic, and stalkers are doing that on cue these days. All right, I'm sure if there are any U.S. politicians listening to this lecture right now, they're saying, you know what, Mr. Smith, I'd like to see you leave this country. Well, that's perfectly fine. It's still a biological attack, ladies and gentlemen. If you expel bodily functions in someone's face, that's a biological attack, because you are knowingly and willingly spreading germs to a person with the intent of causing them some sort of physical harm or ailment because of those germs. That is a biological attack, but see, this time our national security apparatus isn't doing what it did in the 60s. It's not walking up to people in airports with aerosol cans full of bacteria and spraying them down with it. It's not walking up to people in parks spraying them down with aerosol cans full of bacteria. Okay, the U.S. Army is not filling light bulbs up with bacterial substances and throwing the light bulbs on the train tracks so the train can run over the light bulbs and spew bacteria all over the place. Okay, the U.S. Armed Forces is not injecting bugs, beetles, and cockroaches with bacteria and throwing the bugs off of planes onto the people below. Okay, the U.S. Navy is not parking ships on the coast of San Francisco and dumping bacteria in the air so the entire city of San Francisco can be covered with a bacterial fog. Okay, the U.S. Army and the CIA aren't getting together and building cars that spew bacteria out of the tailpipes. Okay, now what they're doing is something called clandestine gang stalking, but it has similar auspices. Rather than doing those types of things, what they're doing is they're signaling knuckleheads, useful idiots and gang stalkers, undercover operatives and liaisons to a targeted person's exact location, and they're basically using human beings as the biological weapon this time. Okay? They're not filling water balloons with dirty bacterial liquids and throwing them at people from a distance. Okay, that was the old days. Now they're just simply signaling people to walk up to targeted individuals and fling germs in the air using body functions right near the target so that the target can get doused with the stuff and wind up sick and angry. That's what they want. That's what gang stalking is. It's a disruption protocol. Yes, the target is under attack as a matter of experimentation purposes and data collecting. The same as COINTELPRO, the same as MK Ultra, the same as Operation Chaos, and the same as the Zersetsa. It's the same operating procedure. It's the same type of strategy and stratagem being used. It's the same sort of civilian spy network situation that's being used, but it's been figured out they're using signals. Now they're trying to make these signals harder to determine. I mean, I've put it out there probably more than anybody else, the kinds of signals that are used in gang stalking, the kinds of signals that stalkers use between themselves to point out a target. All right. Nowadays, in order to keep their cover, they're not using the kinds of biological weapons that we read about in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Now they're using people as the biological weapons. Find a sick stalker, signal that person to a targeted person's location, be it on a bus, it could be in a restaurant, it could be in a mall, it could be in a food court, it could be in a park, it could be in a library, it could be at work. It could be at an institution of higher learning. Signal a sick person to the, and mind you, stalkers signal each other. They know the signaling mechanism. Signal a sick person to a target's location with the instructions of coughing, sneezing, belching, heavy breathing, using any bodily function you have to expel bacteria from your body onto the body of the target. And I've talked in depth about these signaling mechanisms and how targets are located and how they're confronted by stalkers. Okay, look at my YouTube video on signaling, ladies and gentlemen. And I talk about all the different ways that stalkers signal each other and how they learn to do signaling. It's a combination of hands-on instructions and on-the-job training. Okay, some stalkers learn signaling mechanisms on the fly. Okay, some stalkers are actually shown it up close. Okay, sometimes stalkers go out in packs, and you have a trainer stalker who uses signals around targets to teach prospective stalkers how to do signaling. Sometimes they go out in groups of 5 or 6, and there's one that's teaching the other ones. There's one stalker teaching the other 5 how to do signaling. And they use targeted individuals, real living, breathing Okay, inalienable right-bearing U.S. citizens as targets for training other stalkers how to do signaling. So whether it's a live round of stalking or whether it's a training session of stalkers, the target is still the target. And there are many different ways, many of them covert, as to how to train stalkers to stalk. It's a mechanism, it's a protocol, it's state-sanctioned thuggery, it's national security, data collection, human behavior experimentation, and the testing of physiological and psychological warfare tactics on a person in real time. Okay, it's supposed to be invigorating for the stalkers and horrifying for the targets. And the national security and intelligence apparatus in this country makes it all possible. Why? Because they have the power to do it, and they're willing to wield that power as a luxury to themselves. Okay? So we're going to look at Director Colby for a second. We're going to look at his exchanges with members of this House committee, this congressional committee. And keep in mind, this is the U.S. intelligence agencies and activities, intelligence costs and fiscal procedures. House before the Select Committee on Intelligence, U.S. House of Representatives, 94th Congress, first session, July 31st through August 8th of 1975. So we have a number of documents here. We're not going to read every word of every document. We have 10 here. We have 4, 8, 12. We have 13 pages of documents here between William Colby and various members of Congress. We're going to read the more impactful exchanges. Okay, this is page 124 of my lecture notes. Mr. Colby, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be glad to answer your questions. Chairman Pike, thank you very much, Mr. Colby. You have certainly given us a very fine and broad overview of the intelligence community. You state, and I would tend to agree with you, that we have the finest intelligence gathering operation in the world. Do we know what the Soviets spend for intelligence? And Mr. Colby said that they have rough estimates. Chairman Pike continues. He wants to know if it's less than $1 billion, or is it closer to 100 million? And Mr. Colby is saying that he doesn't have those figures available. So Chairman Pike doesn't have what he needs to know about the Soviets. He wants to know how much they spend on intelligence activities. All right, and Mr. Colby doesn't have the answer. And quite frankly, that's something that Chairman Pike wants to know more about. And Mr. Colby is basically telling him all we have right now are estimates. So we're going to move on to the next page here. It's going to be page 125. And we're going to be looking at Mr. Colby and Mr. McClory, Congressman McClory. Mr. McClory is asking, do the American citizens know more about the KGB than the Soviets know about their own KGB? And Mr. Colby is saying certainly. And that any major project may be taken to the president himself, which at this time is Gerald Ford. And keep in mind, like I say, I'm going to do a lot of paraphrasing here because we have 13 documents, and I'm not going to read them line for line, but we're going to catch the impactful points here. Let me see. Let me scroll down a little bit here. Mr. McClory wants to know more about the Glomar Explorer, which is a project that the CIA was working on. Mr. Colby is telling Congressman McClory that he is not at liberty to talk about this project. And Mr. McClory asks, is it the same category as the U-2 as far as its value for national security purposes? And let me see. Mr. Colby is saying he wants to talk about this in an executive session. He's not prepared to talk about it right now. So this is some of the secrecy we're seeing in these committees that caused all of the frustration on the part of Mr. Pike. And Mr. Colby's acknowledging that there needs to be some improvements in the CIA. And Mr. McClory is saying that isn't it a fact that the defense intelligence units, the Air Force, Army, and Navy operate quite independently of the CIA, and their budgets are developed independently? Mr. Colby saying no, that these budgets are being decided in a parallel fashion. And Mr. McClory is saying you're satisfied with the way they operate and the way that they're managing their financing of their operations. Mr. Colby saying he has no major problem. So Mr. McClory and really the whole committee sees a problem with how budgets and money is being appropriated, not only in the CIA and the FBI, but also in the U.S. Armed Services. And Mr. Colby disagrees. He's saying he doesn't see any problem with how the finances of these organizations are being managed. And we're going to scroll down a little bit. Okay, so Mr. McClory is yielding back to Chairman Pike. Mr. Colby, he's asked, and Mr. Stanton is being recognized. Mr. Stanton, Congressman Stanton, is asking Director Colby, who pays for the expenses of the intelligence community? Mr. Colby says the community staff is paid from the CIA's budget. Mr. Stanton is saying 99% of the expenses are paid by the CIA. And Mr. Colby saying yes of that particular staff of the intelligence community. It is a very small staff as government staffs go, Mr. Stanton. Mr. Stanton says, where is the community operation located? And Mr. Colby replies it is located in the CIA headquarters. And Mr. Stanton says, is that Langley, Virginia? And Mr. Colby answers yes. Mr. Stanton says, how many committees does the intelligence community of the Intelligence Board have? And Mr. Colby answers there are 3 main committees. The U.S. Intelligence Board. And Mr. Stanton interrupts and says the total number. And Mr. Colby replies it's 3 main committees. Mr. Stanton says are there 13. Mr. Colby replies there are 13 subcommittees of the U.S. Intelligence Board. So there are 3 main committees of the U.S. Intelligence Board. It's headquartered in Langley, Virginia. And there are 13 subcommittees of the Intelligence Board that handle all operations, including budgetary considerations. And that concluded that particular exchange that I wanted. That exchange occurred August 4th, 1975. Now we're going to fast forward to the next round of questioning for Director Colby. This round of questioning took place 2 days later on August 6th, 1975. And we basically have Mr. Colby acquiescing to Chairman Pike's request of a summary of CIA activities. And basically, Mr. Colby talks about the history of the intelligence community in the United States, the history of the CIA and its activities, and we'll look at a general overview of what he says. He talks about the National Security Act of 1947 and the Central Intelligence Agency Act of 1949. These acts, which were ratified by Congress, established the National Security Council, and under it, the CIA. The CIA's mission was described under the direction of the NSC, or the National Security Council, to advise the Council to make recommendations for the coordination of intelligence activities of the departments and agencies, correlation, evaluation, and dissemination of intelligence, performance of services and common concern centrality, and in what is deliberately a broad grant of authority, the performance of such functions and duties related to intelligence affecting national security, as the National Security Council may from time to time direct. The CIA was conceived as a central agency, drawing upon the other members of the intelligence community, but having a unique capability to perform certain of the missions expected. The predecessor to the CIA was called the Office of Strategic Services, and it was active during World War II. And the CIA was devised from the blueprint of the Office of Strategic Services. Intelligence gathering, intelligence analysis, intelligence production, covert or secret activities in the political and paramilitary fields, etc. In the earliest years of the CIA, there was an attempt, and this is still William Colby talking, Director Colby, to provide secret intelligence and in a separate organizational compartment from other work of the CIA. But General Walter B. Smith, the director of the CIA at the time, found that this produced friction, duplication, and inefficiency. So he merged the functions of collections with these other functions and duties. Mr. Chairman says this chart outlined the organization of the CIA. And then Mr. Colby presented a chart of the CIA's organizational structure. It has the Director of Central Intelligence at the top. Under him is a Deputy Director. And it has an intelligence community staff and a National Intelligence Officer staff working with it. Underneath these three compartments, you have the audit staff, the Inspector General, and the General Counsel. You have the Legislative Council and the Comptroller. The audit staff audits CIA activities for policy compliance. The Inspector General is also an auditor of CIA activities. It's the central inspector of CIA activities. Then you have General Counsel, which is basically the legal wing of the CIA, which inspects all of its activities for legality. You have the Legislative Council of the CIA, which essentially is the attorney staff of the CIA that handles legislative matters, particularly of a federal nature. And then you have the Comptroller, which oversees budget and financial affairs. You have the Directorate of Intelligence underneath, the Directorate of Operations, the Directorate of Science and Technology, and the Directorate of Administration. The Directorate of Intelligence oversees general intelligence operations and apparatus. The Directorate of Operations oversees operational guidelines and ensures that they're followed. The Directorate of Science and Technology oversees the CIA's acquisition of technological resources to be used in intelligence activities. And the Directorate of Administration overlooks administrative affairs and makes sure that the bureaucratic elements of the CIA are intact. He then begins that the major work of the CIA is carried out in the 4 main directories listed there. We are going to move on to the next chart. The next chart gives an overview of CIA functions. You have the intelligence function, the support function, and the covert action function. The intelligence function is the collection of overt, technical, clandestine, and counterintelligence activities. Processing, which is photographic, electronic, data storage, and analysis of intelligence activities. You have the production element, which is the political, economic, military, scientific, and biographic elements of CIA activity. And then you have the management, services, communications, which is essentially the arm of the CIA that oversees the communication guidelines of the CIA, particularly interdepartmental. And then the covert actions are political and paramilitary, which is basically the covert actions are of the CIA. The covert action wing or the covert action department are those secret or clandestine activities that the CIA takes on. They're sometimes of a controversial nature. They're always of a political nature. And they use paramilitary resources, which is basically semi-military resources and semi-military operations to accomplish these secret or covert objectives among the American people. Let's see, we are going to... Okay, Chairman Pike this is on page 241. Chairman Pike is basically saying that he believes that Mr. Colby is being candid and forthright about budgetary procedures. And he's saying he's pleased with Mr. Colby in that regard. He's saying that that Director Colby has stated that his financial guidance letters contain a paragraph requiring that you be notified in advance of any planned endeavors that carry a significant risk of embarrassment to the government in general or the agency in particular. And he wants to know if there's any procedure that allows Congress to be notified as well. And Mr. Colby's saying no. So basically what's being said here, and this is towards the middle of page 241, Director Colby gets advance notice of any CIA activity that could be potentially embarrassing to the government of the United States. So for example, when Project MKUltra was implemented, the director of the CIA got a memo. Okay, and I believe it was Alan Dulles, who was the director of the CIA at that time, got a memo stating we're getting ready to start a project. Alan Dulles got a message from his CIA, okay, saying that there was a project that was underway. It's called MKUltra. It has controversial tactics for data gathering and human behavior experimentation, and this could be something that could be an embarrassment to the U.S. because of its because it's going to be used on the United States. The populace of the United States are going to be used as test dummies for MKUltra, and this could be an embarrassment, but we're going to do it anyway. We'll just have to keep it secret, okay? That kind of thing. And Chairman Pike is asking Mr. Colby, he's asking him, does Congress get a notification if the CIA decides to undertake a project that, if found out, could be embarrassing to the U.S.? And Mr. Colby says no. So what that says, ladies and gentlemen, is that the CIA gets internal documents sent out to the director that any project that the CIA takes on that if found out could be controversial or embarrassing to the United States, that the director be made known. So let's say I was the director of the CIA, okay? Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, me, your host. If my CIA, maybe my assistant deputy director, got word from our covert operations department that the CIA was getting ready to undertake a project that was controversial in nature and could be seen as an embarrassment to the United States if this project were found out, I, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, the director of the CIA, would get a memo, and I would have some say as to how this project would be implemented, or if there was any changes I thought needed to be made, etc., etc. And I, as the director of the CIA, would get to ask questions. So we're going to move over to page 242. We have Mr. Aspen, Congressman Aspen. He's asking Director Colby some questions. He's saying the Supreme Court has decided in 1967 that wiretaps, in particular, this is the subject now. We've shifted from the creation of the CIA and its budgetary considerations and its structure. We've shifted from that topic. Now we're talking about wiretaps, which is basically the CIA's ability to listen in to phone calls between American citizens, to intercept telegrams, and to intercept the mail of American citizens. Okay, now wiretaps are basically the interception of phone calls, in particular, and to a lesser degree telegrams, which was talked about some in the Frank Church Committee. But we're talking about wiretaps here, and that's basically the CIA listening in on phone calls and communications. The Supreme Court said that wiretaps are prohibited by the Fourth Amendment, which means you have to particularize the information that you get. The Supreme Court has also said that except for foreign agents, you need to have a warrant, a federal warrant, to conduct a wiretap. The Safe Streets Act in 1968 says you need a warrant for all wiretaps, and that clearly covers all calls made into the U.S. and going out. Mr. Colby, the director of the CIA, is saying he wants to discuss this in private, basically, in an executive session. So this is something else that Director Colby doesn't want to talk about in public. He doesn't want to talk about the CIA's ability to listen in on people's phone calls. Okay, Mr. Aspen is saying that there's a clause in the U.S. Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, that restricts that, and that there needs to be a federal warrant that is signed by a federal judge if the CIA or any intelligence agency wants to listen in on somebody's phone calls. Mr. Colby is not willing to talk about this at this committee. He wants to talk about it in an executive session. And Mr. Aspen is complying. He's saying, okay, we could talk about this in an executive session, which is a closed session. All right, it's a committee session. It's a congressional committee session where Mr. Colby would be answering questions on his in a closed session that is not televised. It's not recorded. Well, I mean, it's recorded, but it's recorded in a closed session, rather than in public in front of cameras and in front of an audience like these hearings are being done. And keep in mind, in congressional and Senate hearings like this, the people in the room who are allowed in, okay, some members of the media, some staffers, some assistant staffers, and various other interested parties are allowed into these public hearings as witnesses to the proceedings. And then there's somebody documenting everything that's said. There are people recording on electronic devices everything that's said, and these hearings are televised as well, so that everything that's said in these hearings are public information. But with respect to wiretapping, Director Colby wants to do that in a closed door session where it's out of the public's eye. Mr. Aspen, Congressman Aspen, appears to agree with that assertion. Mr. Aspen, Congressman Aspen, continues, this seems to be a very clear violation of the Constitution. You're looking to intercept the mail of U.S. citizens. You're looking to open that mail. You're looking to listen in to phone calls. You're looking at intercepting telegrams. It seems to me that this is a clear violation of the Constitution, and this activity is illegal. Director Colby Director Colby rebuts. I think that the provision of the Safe Streets Act of 1968 does have an item at the end which declares an exemption, declares that it shall not mitigate the president's right to collect foreign intelligence. Chairman Pike interrupts, and we're moving on from Mr. Aspen to Congressman McClory. It is now his turn to ask questions. Congressman McClory begins. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask some questions, Mr. Colby. You can tell me whether or not you think there are any appropriate for public dissemination, but could you tell us how many employees there are of the CIA? Mr. Colby says that falls within the provisions of the CIA Act of 1949. It says that I am authorized not to reveal that. Mr. McClory says that he understands. Mr. Colby says I would be, of course, glad to go into that detail in a closed session. So this is another thing that CIA Director Colby is not comfortable talking about in public. He does not want to disclose publicly how many people or how many employees work for the CIA. He doesn't want to disclose that. And he stated the Safe Streets Act of 1968, which is a congressional measure that was passed that said that there are an exemption. There's an exemption that it shall not mitigate the president's right to collect foreign intelligence. It's a broad rule. Okay, it's a very broad rule. It doesn't necessarily restrict Director Colby from telling how many employees work for the CIA, but that is how Mr. Colby is interpreting that act, and he is not going to disclose publicly how many employees work for the CIA. All right, so 10% of the employees, Mr. Colby's telling them that 10% of the employees work outside of the headquarters, and 90% of the CIA employees work inside of the headquarters. So domestic activities outside the headquarters are meted out according to their needs with respect to collecting intelligence and data, and also there are some contractors that the CIA hires to do intelligence gathering activities for it. So not everyone that does business with the CIA is an actual CIA employee. The CIA actually hires firms, okay, that have intelligence capabilities to do its data gathering for it. So a lot of contracting, a lot of outsourcing of data gathering activity by the CIA to firms and contractors. All right. So they're going to talk a little bit about finances. Congressman McClory is still speaking. You have described pretty much how we keep track of funds and your auditing of funds insofar as the CIA is concerned. How do you handle this out in the field? Don't some of those agents or some personnel have some sort of independent use of funds? Mr. Colby replies, no. There is an allocation of funds to be devoted to the work on a specific project or a resource package. These fan accounts, these various accounts, I would be told may my authorization was, I would be required to have an officer request the funds, then a second signature of the approval of the disbursement of the funds, and that voucher would have to be reviewed by a finance certifying officer. Mr. McClory says you get a full accounting here. Mr. Colby says as much as possible. They get a receipt, they get expenditure notes, things like that. So Mr. Colby is basically telling Congressman McClory, yes, there is some financial accountability. We do have expenditure notes and ledgers and receipts that we require our intelligence gatherers to send us if they use CIA money for expenditures that are basically conducive to CIA intelligence gathering activities. Let's see. Mr. McClory asked Mr. Colby if most of the expenditures are cash expenditures. Mr. Colby replies yes. And they use many different currencies because sometimes CIA activity takes operatives outside of the country. So they use the exchange rate mechanism quite a bit. And they convert a lot of American dollars into foreign currency when the CIA is conducting activities and businesses overseas. And Mr. Colby goes on to basically inform Congressman McClory that they have they do withdrawals. For example, if they go to a foreign country, they open up bank accounts in foreign countries under the assumed names of operatives, and they do cash withdrawals from bank accounts that are started by those operatives. And those transactions are documented as well. Let's see. Mr. McClory wants to know he asked Mr. Colby if Congress is consulted when these various cash expenditures are made at home and abroad. Mr. Colby says that Congress is not consulted and that the CIA basically does its expenditures at its own discretion. Mr. McClory insinuates that the CIA should. Mr. Colby says that it is not required by law. So basically what this committee is doing, this congressional committee, is they're trying to press Director Colby with respect to these financial records. How come Congress is not in the loop? How is it that Congress is not being told beforehand that these expenditures are going to be made? Why is it that the CIA operates independently of Congress? Why doesn't Congress get some say in how the CIA uses its money? And Director Colby is basically telling them it's not required by law. You see, so until laws are passed that require the CIA to brief Congress on use of its funds, the CIA is basically invoking its right not to. And Mr. Colby goes on to say that ever so often, from time to time, depending on the matter, Congress may get some sort of a notification or memorandum from the CIA regarding expenditures and projects. Now, this is interesting here. This is Congressman Giamo. He's questioning Director Colby. And he asks, has the CIA ever printed money or securities of any kind? Mr. Colby replies, yes. Mr. Giamo says, how about American money? Mr. Colby says, not American money. Securities? No. Mr. Giamo says that I understand in response to Mr. Aspen's question, you say that there have been intercepted communications of foreign and American conversations or communications by governmental agencies. Mr. Colby replies he would like to discuss this in a private session, not publicly. Mr. Giamo says that you respond to his question. Mr. Colby replies, I think that the NSA collects foreign communications. Mr. Giamo says this is the first time that the statement of fact of the NSA has been stated or admitted by representatives of the executive branch. Mr. Colby says, no, I believe that all is well known and that the NSA collects foreign communications. That is its mission. What do we mean by foreign communication? Mr. Giamo asks. Director Colby replies, this is what I mean. I would like to get into that for an executive session. Mr. Raskin asks if the gentleman will yield. Mr. Giamo replies, yes, I will yield. Mr. Raskin says, I think it's true that the statement about foreign communications has been made public before, but I think that what is new is that Mr. Colby for the first time today has said that foreign communications can involve communication between American citizens in this country and Mr. Colby interrupts and says, I wouldn't say in this country. I said that various kinds of activities we do abroad. I mean, even CIA does abroad and incidentally picks up. Mr. Aspen says, let's get into the problem about intercepting wiretaps on American citizens here and abroad, but particularly I'm talking about phone calls now from here within this country abroad. That is what I would rather look at and rather not talk about in this open session. He has already said it is true. No, I think it's referred to the fact that we collected NSA collects foreign communications, and I think that I would like to go into the executive session for any further description of what that is all about. So what we have is some disagreement between Director Colby and Congressman Giamo. So it starts with Giamo asking if the CIA has ever printed money. Okay, now typically the printing of money is something that the Federal Reserve System is tasked with, and they print money against a budget of printing money, and that money is printed at interest. It is loaned to banks across the country, and these banks pay the central bank back at interest. That's typically how the American banking system works. Private citizens go to these banks for loans on houses, mortgages, and student loans, etc. And the bank loans the citizens money at interest. And when the interest is paid to the bank is able to pay its loans back to the Federal Reserve System. So the citizen gets what it wants in the way of a loan. The bank gets what it wants. The private bank gets what it wants in the way of interests paid back. And the Federal Reserve Bank gets what it wants from the banks with respect to interest paid back from the private banks. But the CIA apparently prints money. But Director Colby is saying that they print foreign currency, which I'm not totally convinced of that. I believe that the CIA did print American money. It just never disclosed it. But that conversation basically transmorphed into a conversation about wiretaps. And this is something that Mr. Colby's not willing to discuss. I mean, he's there's sort of a disconnect here where Mr. Colby is saying that the NSA collects foreign communications, but what the Congressman, Mr. Giamo, is trying to figure out is, and then Mr. Aspen, what they're trying to figure out is, does foreign communications involve communications between American citizens and citizens of other countries? So, for example, what's being said is that if an American citizen calls a cousin or a colleague or an acquaintance in, let's say they live in Germany, okay? That call from the United States to Germany could be intercepted by the NSA. If there was a call from an American citizen to Italy, Spain, France, England, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, okay, Israel, Egypt, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, South Africa, Australia, okay, any foreign country, those calls were subject to being intercepted by the NSA. Now, what they're trying to get to the bottom of is, does the NSA intercept communications between Americans and other Americans? All right. Basically, that's something that Mr. Colby is apparently saying that he wants to discuss in a closed session. Okay. So foreign communications can be talked about. All right. Well, actually, they've already been talked about, but Director Colby doesn't want to talk about them himself. But these have already been talked about in these hearings. Foreign communications can be intercepted by the NSA, but communications between the Americans to other Americans in this country, that's a little more of a complex matter. That's something that's going to be talked about in closed door sessions as well. So we already know that communications between the Americans and foreigners are intercepted by the NSA oftentimes, but that's something that the director wants to talk about in a closed door session. So in this closed door executive session, which is not public, Director Colby will likely be Director Colby will likely be briefed. The committee, the Congressional Committee, will likely be briefed on the procedures regarding the NSA's collection of American phone calls to foreign nationals and American phone calls to other Americans. What's the frequency that these phone calls are intercepted by the NSA? That's what Director Colby wants to talk about in closed door session. But I can tell you already what happened in the closed door session. Director Colby, he laid out for the committee that the NSA did intercept phone calls between Americans and other Americans in America, and it intercepted phone calls between Americans and foreign nationals as well. So the NSA was right there in the mix, intercepting lots of phone calls that it deemed were phone calls of interest, or rather the persons of interest that were making the phone calls. The CIA took liberties with intercepting those phone calls and listening to them and documenting them. All right, so we're going to look at page 246. Just give me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. I got to pull this document up. All right. right. Before we get into this conversation between Director Colby and Mr. Stanton, there's something that I need to pull up. Just bear with me 1 second, please. All right, so this is going to be between Mr. Colby and Mr. Stanton. So this is going to be Director Colby and Congressman Stanton. They're basically talking about how proposals are approved in the CIA. And basically, Mr. Director Colby is saying if there's a proposal to do any sort of covert activity overseas in particular, it goes before a committee of 40. Or what it calls the 40 committee. And the 40 committee has to approve it. If there's a directive or some sort of an operation proposal that's made that by any department of the CIA, it needs approval. It goes to the 40 committee, which is headed up by Dr. Henry Kissinger, who is the Secretary of the United States, the Secretary of State of the United States right now. And apparently, Mr. Stanton wants to know if there was, who gave permission to the CIA. Was it this 40 committee? Was it Dr. Kissinger, who's the chairman of this 40 committee in the that has direction over CIA activities? Did Henry Kissinger approve the CIA going over into Chile and assassinating people? And let's see. Mr. Colby says yes. Mr. Stanton says, could you explain the nature and extent of the CIA direction or involvement in the support or pre-knowledge of the assassination of General Rene Schneider on October 22nd, 1970? Mr. Colby says that gets into a category of activity, Mr. Stanton, that I have urged to be handled in an administrative session. It gets very complicated. Chairman Pike says, Mr. Stanton, I'm going to side with Mr. Colby on that. Basically, the CIA went over into Chile and apparently did a bunch of assassinations. And Mr. Congressman Stanton wants to know if Henry Kissinger was the one that ultimately approved those assassinations. You see? And that's something that's going to be talked about in closed door sessions. They're not going to talk about this right now. All right, so these assassinations that took place in Chile, Director Colby is asking if they can be discussed in a closed door session, and Chairman Otis Pike of this congressional committee is agreeing that it should be handled in a closed door session. So they're not going to talk about this stuff publicly, but long story short, yes, Henry Kissinger did approve CIA assassinations in Chile. So we're going to move on to the next page, and the final page of the chairman the William Colby questions. Let's see. All right. So in this last page, basically to paraphrase it, we have Congressman Dellums asking Mr. Colby to furnish documents on the it's basically he's asking for statistical materials that goes to the Inspector General's office. He wants to know how the Inspector General of the United States investigates the CIA and what documents the CIA has sent to the Inspector General of the United States. And he's requesting those documents from Director Colby. All right, so that concludes Director Colby's that concludes Director Colby's questioning for this lecture. We're going to move on to assassination references. Congressman Johnson is questioning Mr. Colby at this time, and he's basically saying he's basically asking Director Colby if he thinks that CIA assassinations should stop. Mr. Colby says that he does. And he's basically saying, well, just write a directive. If you want CIA assassination activities to stop, the congressman is asking, then do a directive. Draw up a structural blueprint and internal laws and policies that the CIA is required to follow. If you want assassinations to stop, draw up a directive instructing your employees not to do any more assassinations. And Director Colby is saying that would be hard to write. I don't know how to write a directive such as that. And Congressman Johnson has said, we'll write one that will legally restrict the CIA from doing assassinations at home and abroad. Mr. Colby saying, I don't have a problem with that. You can write a directive stopping the CIA from doing assassinations. Let's see. Policy making activities are in question. Mr. Congressman Johnson is basically asking Director Colby, has he been involved in policy making? And he's saying he's not been involved in policy making, that's being done by a third party. And Mr. Johnson is saying that he thinks that there needs to be more oversight in the policy-making process in the CIA. So we're going to look at page 134. All right, so basically, so we're going backwards a step. We're going from 137 to 134. 134 feeds into 137. They're talking about assassinations, okay? Basically, Mr. Director Colby is essentially saying that he does not support overseas assassinations. And if he doesn't support overseas assassinations, by proxy, he doesn't support CIA assassinations on American soil either. And quite frankly, Mr. Murphy is saying to Director Colby that he's basically repeating Director Colby's own words, that he believes that there should be some semblance of a secret budget that the CIA can manage. And basically what Mr. Murphy appears to be implying is that if we give the CIA a secret budget, who's to say it wouldn't take that secret money and carry out assassinations, particularly overseas? Because the CIA had tried numerous times to assassinate people. I mean, it assassinated the president of Chile. The CIA attempted to assassinate Fidel Castro. It assassinated a bunch of African politicians. It assassinated some Iraqi politicians. I mean, the CIA was assassinating people left and right overseas. And Congress was sitting here saying, hey, where do you get the money for this? Where does the CIA get the money to travel to a country overseas or multiple countries overseas and assassinate foreigners in their own country? Where are you getting the money? We need oversight. You need to start coming to Congress with this stuff. They're saying you all can't make these decisions on your own. You need guidance. You need directives. You need all these things. You need all these things. So we're going to move on to the next narrative. All right, so from pages, and we're going backward in time here. We're going from 134. Now we're going back down to page 90, and then page 89. I'm going to sort of paraphrase and summarize these exchanges. What you have are Congressman Lynn and Congressman Giamo having a discussion on budgetary oversight. James T. Lynn was the director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Gerald Ford. And basically you have Mr. Giamo and Mr. Dellums questioning Mr. Lynn and Mr. Stotts respectively on their budgeting and financial disbursement practices. And really what it all boils down to is this. If there are any questionable financial activities, questionable expenditures, questionable payments, questionable withdrawals, questionable deposits made by the CIA, are any of these questionable financial activities brought to the attention of Congress in any way, Mr. Stotts, the head of the GAO, and Mr. Lynn, who, as I just said, was the director of Office and Management Budget under President Ford, both said no. No, we do not have any type of reporting procedure that we use to notify Congress if we find something fishy or suspicious. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. That's why I read directly from newspaper articles, declassified documents, federal documents, state and local documents, federal FBI documents, declassified CIA documents, okay, newspaper clippings, newspaper articles, okay, Senate and congressional hearings, the whole nine. I read from these documents directly because if somebody told you this stuff without a reference point or without some sort of a reference or something to pull this information from, you wouldn't believe it. Some of the stuff that these intelligence agencies have done and still continue to do is unbelievable. And it takes these documented documents, these historically kept documents that are kept in the printing office of the United States of America, the Congressional Printing Office. Okay, these documents have been declassified for the public good, so we can see all of these hearings and these congressional matters and these newspaper articles that give us a fuller understanding of just what is an intelligence agency and why is it important. So we're going to move on to a newspaper article that I have. It's the Washington Post. It's January 13th, 1976. The title of the article is "The CIA Found Penetrating U.S. Groups." The writer is Lawrence Stern. And the article begins, Senate investigators have gathered evidence that the Central Intelligence Agency has renewed its penetration of educational, religious, and cultural groups in the United States as a part of its foreign intelligence activities. The agency's participation of domestic organizations created a major uproar after exposure of the practice by Rampart magazine in 1967 and led to the adoption of legislation intended to prevent it from happening again. However, for the past 6 months, the Senate Intelligence Committee has been pursuing evidence that the CIA had renewed its connections with domestic organizations. The specific links could not be learned yesterday. In 1967, the agency was discovered to have been funding dozens of labor, farmer, cultural, and student organizations through a network of private foundations. The committee staff is considering conducting public hearings on the issue, although the February 29th deadline for the completion of this Senate interview, uh, basically a series of contacts between White House staff members on legislative remedies to reform the intelligence community has been had. So basically, Senator Frank Church announced that he will conduct a joint press conference with Staff Director William Miller Wednesday to unveil formally proposed legislative solutions to CIA abuses. So this article is about Senator Church and Senator Pike. About basically the CIA has been using hidden operatives, to infiltrate churches, companies, neighborhoods. Let's see, what else? It's penetrating schools. I mean, the CIA, there really ain't there ain't no organization that the CIA is not spying on right now, and they're just trying to find out what the legality of it is, and what are you doing with the information you're collecting. All right, that's what the Senate wants to know. So these Senate committees will include congressional influence over covert operations, the declassification of information, basically making public the intelligence activities that the Senate by vote decides to be improper. The White House is looking at drawing up committee reform legislation. The committee staff director, Cyril Field, said the House group has decided to develop our own proposals influenced by the administration. Pike and his Democratic colleagues have, on the whole, confronted the administration more aggressively and demanding information than the Church Committee has. So it's basically saying that here that Otis Pike, the Democrat from New York, his committee is being more demanding than Frank Church's committee was. Senator Church asked for information of a sensitive nature concerning the spying capacities of the intelligence community in this country. But Congressman Pike is being even more demanding. He's asking for even more documents. He's asking for more declassifications. He's asking for more information. He's asking for quite a bit of data concerning the intelligence agencies in this country's capacity to spy on people. So Congressman Otis Pike is being a lot more demanding with respect to what he is asking of Congress. So we're going to move on to the last portion of this lecture. This is going to be a Time magazine article on Congressman Pike's committee. The title of this article is "The Nation: New Chapter in Pike's Progress." This document was drafted on October 13th, 1975 at 12 o'clock midnight, and it begins its time Congress faced up to its responsibilities. New York Democratic Representative Otis Pike declared last week, added with typical Pickean acerbity, "I'm not so sure Congress wants to face up to its responsibilities." Pike, however, was fully ready. At issue, you have the CIA documents on its failure to predict the communist surprise Tet offensive in Vietnam in 1968. On President Ford's orders, the CIA had refused to produce the documents for Pike's committee investigating U.S. intelligence, so the committee subpoenaed them. The CIA then ignored the subpoena, so Pike's committee voted 10-3 to ask for the support of the full House enforcing the CIA to obey. Implicit in that vote was the threat of a contempt citation against CIA Director William Colby. Weighing those warnings and threats, President Ford decided to compromise. He ordered Colby to turn over the 7-in-high pile of documents on 3 conditions. The first is no public disclosure of the material before a consultation with the CIA. 2, any dispute over a document's release to be refereed by the White House. And 3, a presidential decision not to release a document for security reasons would be binding unless the committee chose to go to court. Pike thought that compromise was reasonable enough, and his committee voted to accept it. So I'll stop there for a quick second, ladies and gentlemen. Apparently, the Pike Committee, this congressional committee, wanted CIA documents on why it failed to predict the Tet offensive in Vietnam. Okay, the Tet offensive was a military offensive that was basically a series of coordinated attacks, surprise attacks, that was launched January 30th and 31st, 1968 by 85,000 North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops across South Vietnam, targeting 100 cities, towns, and military installations, including the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. The offensive aimed to trigger a popular uprising and force the U.S. to withdraw. While the U.S. and South Vietnam ultimately repelled the attacks and inflicted devastating casualties on the communist forces, the offensive became a turning point in that Vietnam War. So basically, it was a surprise attack by the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong on their enemies, which were the South Vietnamese and the United States. And this surprise attack by the Viet Cong against the U.S. was a bloodbath. They attacked the Viet Cong attacked 100 cities, towns, and military installations. And apparently the attacks were repelled, and it was documented as a tactical U.S. win. And they're saying that the U.S. forces inflicted 50,000 casualties on their enemy. But what's being I mean, listen, ladies and gentlemen, when you read about the Vietnam War and these offensives and these surprise attacks and these massacres and these battles that happened in Vietnam, you're gonna get different language from different authors. Okay, even when it comes to the outcome of the Vietnam War, I mean, you got some people that swear up and down that the U.S. won that war decisively and that they taught the Vietnamese government and these communists a lesson, and how the U.S. went in and ruled Vietnam and this and that. I mean, it's subjective to how you look at history. The communist forces are typically seen as having been the victors in that war, despite massive casualties on both sides. Okay, plus the communists found a way to get American soldiers high on dope. Okay, and the communists used drug networks to get hundreds of thousands of U.S. soldiers high on heroin and cocaine throughout that war. And the soldiers themselves didn't even realize that they were purchasing this heroin and cocaine from the very enemy that they were fighting. And so you had various communist actors that were down there shooting at the soldiers with machine guns and throwing grenades at the U.S. soldiers one day. And then later that night, the same communist forces were selling the soldiers cocaine and heroin. And the soldiers were buying it up too, tens of millions of dollars worth of heroin and cocaine that the U.S. soldiers were purchasing from the communists. But see, the U.S. soldiers didn't realize that it was the communists that were basically engineering these dope sales. And Cuba was involved in that. The dope was coming up from Nicaragua, Bolivia, Colombia, and Peru. And some of it was coming from Mexico, the marijuana. But the hard stuff was coming from Colombia, Bolivia, Nicaragua, and to a lesser degree, Peru. And these and the governments of these countries were actively cultivating these drugs and using taxpayer money to grow, pack, and ship the dope to Cuba. And from Cuba, it was traveling a route that saw it go east, okay, in the communist territory. And the dope was making its way to Vietnam. And communist dope dealers were taking that dope, the heroin and cocaine, and they were basically using Vietnamese drug dealers to sell it to the Americans. And the Americans were buying dope from the very communists that they were trying to beat in the war. And the communists saw that as a win. They said, we're taking American lives on the battlefield, and the ones that are living, we're getting them high on our dope. And a lot of that money was going into the treasuries of communist countries. And they were the ones getting the Americans high, and they were doing it on purpose. They wanted the dope to affect the Americans in battle. And so, the loss of life wasn't enough. They wanted to sell the Americans dope on top of that. And the Americans were buying it. The soldiers were buying it. See, they thought that they were buying this heroin and cocaine from dope operations in Vietnam that involved pro-American South Vietnamese forces. But the South Vietnamese were getting the dope from the North Vietnamese. And the North Vietnamese was getting the dope from Chinese influences, and the Chinese were getting the dope from the Cubans. The Cubans were getting the dope from the Nicaraguans, the Colombians, and the Bolivians, and the Mexicans. So all that dope that the U.S. forces in Vietnam were using, it followed a path from South America, Mexico, Cuba, China, Vietnam, and right into the hands of the U.S. soldiers. And a lot of U.S. soldiers were coming back to the United States high on dope. And a lot of soldiers were coming back to the United States after the war ended, strung out on dope. Ladies and gentlemen. And a lot of them came down here and were homeless because they were spending every dime they had on drugs here. And there was a huge homeless epidemic among Vietnamese soldiers, and they had a difficult time reassimilating into society because so many hundreds of thousands of them were hooked on dope when they got here. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Tet Offensive ties into that because these series of attacks was aimed to trigger a popular uprising. Okay, yeah, they were raising revenues from dope sales to U.S. soldiers, but that was just sort of a supplement that they used to finance their activities. They wanted the U.S. out of there. So the Tet Offensive was supposed to be a surprise attack. What the Pike Committee wants to know is, how is it that this Tet Offensive was not sniffed out? Why is it that this Tet Offensive was not told to the Americans ahead of time, and how come they were not allowed that information? They didn't have time to defend themselves. They had to defend themselves on the fly, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, they had to defend themselves on the fly. And that's not how war is. You're supposed to have some advance notice of what your enemy is planning. And the Pike Committee wants to know from the CIA and the CIA has roles in military operations. Okay, the Pike Committee is asking the CIA, hey, bring us the documents. How come the U.S. soldiers weren't told ahead of time that surprise attack was coming? Okay, why is it that they had to defend themselves against the Tet Offensive on the fly? Why did the U.S. soldiers and the South Vietnamese have to improvise a defense against the Tet Offensive? How come they weren't notified ahead of time that surprise attack was going to happen? They had to defend themselves on the fly. Why? Okay, why were they not told ahead of time that this attack was going to happen? See, in military battles, when offensives and attacks like that are being planned, both sides typically get briefed. I mean, it's just the nature of battle. It's just the nature of war strategy. Okay, you have informants, you have undercovers, you have turncoats, you have radio communication interceptions, you have data interception, you have all kinds of interception techniques to find out what your enemy is about to do. What's being said is that Tet Offensive, that happened on the fly. Why didn't the U.S. armed services in Vietnam get advance warning or advance notice about that offensive that was coming from the North Vietnamese, the Viet Cong? Why didn't the U.S. get that notification? And that's what's that's what's being debated here. Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State, is being defiant here. Apparently, Henry Kissinger, or I'm sorry, okay, so there were documents that explained why the U.S. didn't know ahead of time about the offensive, but the Pike Committee had to subpoena those documents because the CIA director, William Colby, refused to hand over those documents as to why the American Armed Services was not told ahead of time about that offensive. So because William Colby refused to hand those documents over, the Pike Committee voted 10-3 to subpoena those documents, and then they had to hand them over. So President Gerald Ford got involved, and he told Director Colby to hand over the documents as long as they were kept private, out of the public eye. Any dispute was to be referred to the White House for mediation, and a presidential decision not to release a document would be binding. Ladies and gentlemen, the White House wanted to get involved in this. The White House had some knowledge about the Tet Offensive as well. It was a bloodbath. It was a massacre. And there were tens of thousands of lives lost on both sides. But what's happening here is the White House has stepped in and said, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to tell CIA Director Colby to release those documents to the Pike Committee. But the White House, the President of the United States, we want to be the arbiters and the mediators of the information. Any disputes over the information, what it means, how it's disseminated, comes to the White House. We're not going to make this a drawn-out battle between the Pike Committee and the CIA. The White House wants to get involved. And we're going to get involved as a referee to this thing. So any disputes over this information come to us. All right, so the congressman then looked at Henry Kissinger. When the congressman questioned official Thomas D. Boyott, Boyott criticized intelligence failures during the Cyprus invasion, which was a whole separate. This was a whole separate. This was a whole separate matter. The U.S. invasion of Cyprus, which is near Greece. Pike found that the witness had been forbidden to answer key questions. So the State Department had documents and information on the invasion of Cyprus, which is a whole separate matter. And apparently this witness was instructed by Henry Kissinger, who was the chief of the Secretary of State of the U.S. Department of State. Okay, he was the head guy of the Department of State. Okay, he was the Secretary of State, the chief diplomat of the U.S. Henry Kissinger told Thomas Boyott not to answer the committee's questions concerning the invasion of Cyprus. So, because Mr. Boyott was not cooperating, the Pike Committee had a vote on a subpoena, and the committee voted 9-2 to subpoena Boyott's critical memos on Cyprus. So you'll see that pattern throughout these committee hearings. The CIA's and the Department of State's witnesses to the Pike Committee a lot of times refused to answer questions or turn over documents related to questions that the Pike Committee had. So the Pike Committee kept having to hold votes to subpoena information. That's kind of like going over somebody's head. If you ask somebody a question in a congressional hearing and they don't answer it, the witness that's before you, you can hold a vote to subpoena the information. Then they are obligated under law to give you the information that you require. It's kind of like a filibuster. Okay, you don't bring a document to the hearing, you don't answer a question, you stonewall the process. Then the congressional committee or the Senate committee can hold a quick vote among the committee members present to subpoena the documents or information that you're unwilling to provide. If the yeas outweigh the nays, then you have to bring those documents and submit the information by law. It's just that simple. So that's what they did. They subpoenaed the information about Cyprus. It talks some more about Mr. Pike. Mr. Pike now it's giving us general information. He's 54 years old during the can't get it out. During the time frame corresponding to these hearings, Congressman Pike is 54 years old. He is the chairman of the Pike committees. He is the one that's hammering the CIA on their involvements in various covert activities. He's hammering the GAO about budgeting restrictions. He's hammering the OMB about budgeting practices. I mean, he's hammering everybody. and he's being very stern. He's being very demanding, and even times he's being adversarial to these intelligence officers about getting him the information he needs to ensure that the CIA's activities and the activities of the national intelligence community, the national security community in the United States is being watched over at all times by the Congress of the United States for oversight, because they found lots of abuses that these intelligence agencies were taking. So this 54-year-old gray-haired man, Otis Pike, the chairman of these committees, he's basically a hard-nosed guy. I mean, he's the son of a Republican Long Island banker. He was an admirer of Franklin Roosevelt. He joined the Democratic Party at 21 years of age. He was a Princeton graduate. He went to Columbia Law School and finished in 1948. Pike was elected to Congress from his conservative Long Island district in 1960. So he was elected to Congress as a Democrat in a mostly Republican constituency. He enjoys cruises. He bought a $8,250 Navy launch. His wife Doris and he live in a 2-story Victorian frame house where he was born in Washington. He occupies a modest 3-bedroom apartment above a delicatessen near the Capitol. So he's a wealthy guy. He comes from money. He's earned a lot of money in his career. They believe at this particular time, 1976, that Mr. Pike is going to run for James L. Buckley's U.S. Senate seat. It would be a tough fight, but for now, he is determined to nettle the members of the administration who conceal activities Pike thinks they ought to disclose. Congress may have to revise its own rules to safeguard genuine secrets, said Pike, but that is Congress's decision to make. The foreign affairs of the nation belong to the nation, not just to the executive. Okay, so he was a very constitutionally astute guy. He wanted the U.S. Constitution and not the whims of bureaucracies decide the trajectory of government. And he was essentially a guy that wanted accountability. He wanted accountability. He wanted accountability among intelligence agencies, ladies and gentlemen. He was a congressman for the duration of his career, and his legacy is the Otis Pike hearings, ladies and gentlemen. And I got stalkers walking up with their usual pestering techniques. But, ladies and gentlemen, that has never deterred me before, and it's not going to deter me now. They like to walk up during the beginning of my lectures, and they like to walk up during the end of my lectures with all kinds of browbeating and what have you to try and sully the spirit of the lecture. But, ladies and gentlemen, I am not one of the mindset to let such foolishness or tomfoolery inhibit my trajectory through these projects. Mind you, ladies and gentlemen, covert thuggery has existed in this country really since 1949. I mean, that was when the intelligence community of this country really started getting into covert actions and covert thuggery, ladies and gentlemen. But me personally, my thinking about, such matters has always been, well, if you expose it, something has to be done about it. It can only run in secret as long as it's allowed to run in secret. And if it's running in secret then that means that something needs to be done as far as remedying the problem. Because see, secrecy is what some of these programs ran on, and they were of a covert nature, which meant that even other members of the U.S. federal establishment didn't know that they were being run, or that these undertakings had even come to fruition. So when you take clandestine gang stalking, for example, ladies and gentlemen, you have these pestering third parties that are signaled to you from somewhere, and they walk up to you with some sort of an idea as to how they're going to pester you that day, or disrupt you, sabotage you, or what have you. You know, these types of operations are run in secret. You know, the U.S. Army and whatever other national security or intelligence factions are behind this, they don't want the American people to know about this, because quite frankly, it would make the country look bad. It'd make the country look stupid. And my thinking is this: rather than run the program that's going to make the country look bad, why not just not run the program at all? Why risk making the country look bad? Because if you're running a program in secret, even if it is governmental in nature, and that program requires U.S. citizens to be harmed in some kind of way, okay, once it's figured out, it's going to get exposed. No one wants to be harmed, especially not by a government, because governments are essentially all powerful, and they run off of the taxpayers' dime. So they have unlimited resources to harm people if they so chose. So especially if a government is found participating in some kind of bureaucratic thuggery, like MK Ultra, like Zersetzung protocols, like COINTELPRO or Operation Chaos, or any of these, MK Search, MK Naomi, okay, any of these programs that involve massive amounts of U.S. human capital and treasure to essentially torment U.S. citizens as a data collection mechanism. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, and it should be exposed. If it becomes public, if the mechanisms become seeable or foreseeable, it should be exposed, even if it's a government. And you're not unpatriotic if you disagree with what your government does. I mean, nobody wants some useful idiot pesterer walking up to you, doing whatever they want to do because some other signaler or gang stalker told them to do it. You see, nobody wants that. What kind of life is that? Especially in America, where you're guaranteed inalienable rights, at the very least, under the founding documents of this country. Who wants to deal with something like that? Of course I'm going to expose it. I mean, do I look like the kind of guy, ladies and gentlemen, just look at my body of work. Do I look like the kind of guy that's going to sit down and allow third-party pesterers to confront me on a daily basis with basically these covert signaling mechanisms that they use that is tantamount to general thuggery? It's just thuggery. There's nothing to it. It's just thuggery, and it's state-sanctioned thuggery, and it's an attempt to control society, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't just control the life of a target, it controls the life of the stalkers too. Because they don't act on their own power or authority. They act on the power and authority of the group. Okay, stalkers know they're a group. They know that everything they do is essentially a collusion effort. And I suggest that there's probably 50 million gang stalkers nationwide, 50 million at least. Okay, again, the U.S. federal government, the U.S. psychiatric community, the Supreme Court, Congress, the news media, nobody in this country of who has a voice is talking about this as a mainstream issue. And that's disappointing because there are countless American citizens who have had their lives altered in a negative way because of this stuff. And quite frankly, too, I mean, where do you get off implementing, even if this is U.S. Army activity that it's implementing in conjunction with the CIA or somebody? Who are they to dispatch useful idiot thugs by the boatload, by the carload, by the shipload, by the plane load to pester U.S. citizens for any reason at all? In their neighborhood, at work, in public parks, in public facilities, anywhere. Who do these nutcases think they are? Okay, all it would take is a U.S. Congressman of the United States who has the same fortitude that Otis Pike had, or a U.S. Senator from the United States that had the same fortitude that Frank Church had, to call a committee and investigate specifically accusations of gang stalking in the United States. Okay, it is nothing more than state-sanctioned harassment, subversion, spying, attacks, thuggery, and germ spreading. Just like MK Ultra was, just like the Zersetzung was, just like COINTELPRO was to a smaller degree. That's all gang stalking is. They just brought it back. And now it's high tech. Back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was low tech. In 2026, it's high tech. And quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I have the mindset that if no one in our federal establishment that has a voice or that has influence, political influence, wants to get into this, okay, that's perfectly fine. That's their choice. That's their prerogative. Maybe they have political objectives or political directives that they believe are more important than this matter. Me, I think differently. Okay, if our elected officials see this as not as important as other things, or perhaps our Supreme Court doesn't see it as important as other things, or perhaps the office of the president doesn't see it as important as other things, that's okay. They have the right to disagree with the importance of this matter, and they have a right to direct their attention to any political topic that they think is appropriate. But me, ladies and gentlemen, I have a different view of things. Okay, I'm not one to unnecessarily castigate Congress or the Armed Services or the Department of Justice. I think typically over the past 75 years, the above have served this country with distinction. I do think, however, that over that 75-year period, that a number of these agencies have taken liberties with the American people that they shouldn't. And it causes some sort of administrative catastrophe when these things are exposed. But see, the thing about gang stalking that makes it unique is that it has 75 years of history to pull from. Whoever put together this program was able to observe what happened with COINTELPRO. They were able to observe what happened with MK Ultra, Zersetzung, MK Search, MK Naomi, Operation Chaos, Operation Hoodwink. All of these programs that were similar to gang stalking that have existed over the past 75 years, the orchestrators of clandestine gang stalking were able to review what happened with those programs, and they were able to basically design gang stalking in such a way that it could avoid those pitfalls. those congressional pitfalls, those congressional committees, those Senate committees, those New York Times articles, those Chicago Tribune articles, those Washington Post articles, the television specials on all of these civil rights abuses that the intelligence agencies of this country did to people. Okay, the orchestrators of gang stalking designed gang stalking in such a way so as to avoid those embarrassments. And that's why I'm here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to compare gang stalking to all of the above and give you some semblance as to why it works and why it is important, ladies and gentlemen. So as you continue to follow me, your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, you can find me on Google. You can find me on pretty much every social media page that there is. You can find me on so many different websites that I've built over the past 9 years. You can find me. You can find me via message. I've had a number of people leave me messages with their ideas on the topic. If you want to leave me a message and you have ideas on the topic, and when I say ideas, I mean your own ideas. I mean like what you think of gang stalking and why you think it's important, et cetera, et cetera. You can reach me at 561-666-7971. Also, if you have any ideas on why gang stalking has impacted you, you can email me at eismith@yandex.com. And I'm open to communication with my audiences. Now, I'm not going to guarantee, ladies and gentlemen, that you're going to get a call back or you're going to get an email back. My phone typically goes to voicemail, and you can leave me a message if you want to share your thoughts and ideas on how gang stalking has impacted you, or you can email me and share your ideas on how gang stalking has impacted you. And I'm certainly opening to listening. And even if I don't respond to you, just know that I check my emails and voice messages daily. So I will get a chance to review all said materials. And who knows, maybe I'll mention your thoughts and ideas and your name on one of my lectures if I feel it's conducive to what I'm already talking about. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening today, and I will see you next time.